Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. With facial recognition quickly becoming popular in the world of authentication, one company is daring to ask the question, what happens if your facial identity is stolen? Now, naturally, that would be a nearly insurmountable issue on a personal level, unless, of course, you pay for extensive plastic surgery and are okay looking like a completely different person. So both companies and governing bodies would need to actually work on an increasingly united front to ensure that something like that didn't happen. But it can happen, and it has happened. And there are a few examples with fingerprints. But this company is Arender, and they argue that in order to ensure increased security and ensure that your face isn't stolen, your biometric data has to be completely decentralized. And of course, that means not stored on any type of server or in the cloud. And for that to happen, that would mean that all biometric data is stored on everyone's individual device. And the only reason I say that is, as a reference point, I should add that I think it was a 2018 McAfee survey revealed that 1 in 4 public cloud users have had their data stolen. So it is a very real problem. Sounds to me like we've got a great debate on our hands today and a lot to talk about. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to San Francisco so we can speak with Dr. Martin Zizi, CEO of Arender and innovator behind NeuroPoint, which is a cloudless psychological biometric technology that measures micro-vibrational patterns in a user's hands. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Martin. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Okay, let's say I'm an hybrid, trained as an MD, PhD, but doing physics. And when you merge fields, you end up sitting nowhere because you have 2 chairs and you're in between. That's not always comfortable, but that gives you freedom to do things that other people do not do or didn't do before. And so what I'm doing, I merge neuroscience with mobile technology. Essentially what the company is built upon and was founded for. We do what we would call neural tapping. Without being too technical, neural tapping is capturing nerve system data. You know, there are companies trying to do that with MRI scanners, with EEG elm, or with electrode or implant in your brain. It turns out that you don't need any of this gear because at the end, the brain is connected to the muscle under your skin, and the muscle, when they don't move, they shiver. Every single muscle cell shiver a bit, like 10 times a second. And this shivering is linked to the tension, to the force in the individual muscle cell. And this is directly reflecting the cortex of the human, in any animal, by the way. This reflects the motor cortex of the brain. So I can do that with mobile phone and tablet because the sensors that are there, namely the gyroscope and the accelerometer, are uncannily powerful and sensitive. So you have the brain controlling the muscle being read out by the phone, and there you have neural tapping, and then I let you imagine all the products you can do with that because I have a direct interface between our nervous system and technology. I hope I make it clear.
Absolutely. And I have spoken on this podcast and written articles about how facial recognition is quickly becoming very incredibly popular in the world of authentication. But I invited you on the show today to tell a slightly different side of that story. So can you tell me more about the potential problems around what could happen if your facial identity is stolen? And although it sounds unlikely, could you offer a few examples that highlight why this is a very real problem?
Of course, because not everything that's popular can be safe and effective. Let's start by saying that face recognition is based on image analysis that's very powerful, based on neural network. And there I can start. Essentially, those problems are not unlikely. They didn't happen so far, but they're bound to happen if the technology spread out and become a standard. Cybercrime, as you know, and cyber identity theft are representing between 0.5 and 1% of the GDP of most modern countries. So far as I tell, no case of facial identity identity being stolen have been reported, but there are risks. And I'm not a doomsday sayer. The first risk is mistake. Police, and it has been shown, can use this measure to incorrectly identify you as a person of interest or even chase the wrong guy. Government could use this for mass surveillance. Look at China. And then there is where really the rubber is the road. It is because it's based on neural net and database, and that's where the risk lies. A database, whenever you beam an identity or PII, we say, personally identified information, and you include them in large-scale database, a database by definition will be hacked, even if it's protected, even if it's encrypted. No matter what, they always end up being hacked. And there is a problem when you lose your biometry. Well, it's a loss forever. So that's a real risk. If I lose my facial identity, well, I have a problem to interact with the computing system or with the ecosystem for the rest of my life. Then facial recognition is more prone than other biometry for deep fake. What is a deep fake is, Hollywood, computer graphic imaging, we can generate images with a quality level that you can look or you can feel it's real. So they can average faces using neural net and generate like generic facial features that could breach 17 to 80% of profiles. So it's not safe for that reason. And the last thing that I would like to add is that neural networks are essentially fragile. They're the best and the worst thing. Think about a cathedral. A cathedral is beautiful and solid, but it has a few cornerstones. If you remember, you remove a stone from the vault in a cathedral, the whole edifice may crumble. Neural nets are like that. A neural net can be defeated by another neural net. It's on the web. You can remove 3 pixels from the face of someone. You don't know what those pixels are, but 3 pixels removed from a face will allow you and me to recognize the person as who she or he is. But the neural net can go from 98 to 100% recognition to 0 just by losing 3 pixels out of 12 million large picture. So for all those reasons, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying this is technology that have known failure modes that should be addressed. The failure mode being social, being possible theft, and failure of the recognition itself.
And there does seem to be a lot of concern at the moment around facial recognition. And we only have to look at the news last week and what happened in San Francisco and how they banned government agencies from using it. But another reason I invited you on today was I recently read that you said that biometric data really has to be decentralized. So for anyone that's not read that and your views on this subject, can you tell me a little bit more about it and why decentralization is so important when talking about biometric technologies?
Well, Neil, this is a crucial point because it goes down to the law of unintended consequences. I mean, you, me, everyone on the planet can survive the loss of a credit card number, of the social security, of your wallet. You lose a few thousand creds, but at the end of the day, you're okay. But you lose a password, you change passwords. Imagine if you lose your fingerprint. There is no way you can get a new set of finger. Imagine if you lose your face. There is no way you can get a new face. So the biometric information, essentially you. It's not what you know or what you possess. It's you yourself. So if you lose you have a problem because the system can no longer see you as reliable. So the best thing to do, I think it happened in India. India, as a country, has a lot of investment in biometrics database for payment because they see that as a way to decrease corruption, which is fair and the right thing to do. But by having everyone in a single database, well, a few 100 million of Indians now have lost their identity, and then it's up to the system to see, do we trust those identifiers or don't we? So you see, it's really true that the loss of biometry in database is permanent. So how do you circumvent that? I'm a simple person. I say, well, don't accrue in large database. If you keep all the personally identified information on the device, I don't want to cite a brand, but some brands do that. And it stays on the device at all time, and you can emit a token. Then it's safe. Then people aggress me and say, well, a token can be played back, can be hijacked. No, there are protocols now these days, like the Faroe Islands, that essentially annihilate man in the middle. So you have a trusted device that contains all your personal information and a tokenization or a hashing that make it safe, and the loss of your identity becomes near impossible. Why should it be decentralized? There's also structural arguments. I told you the personal and social argument. Now I go to the technical one. The IoT is bound to grow. You know, we all read these numbers, 20 billion devices by this year, 80 billion in 10 years. But to cut a long story short, the cloud cannot control that in a centralized way because there would be latencies, etc., even with 5G. So essentially, centralization is also a problem from the technological standpoint. So you have to be at the edge. And what the people implementing the future of 5G are saying, well, we need to compute, we need to be at the edge. The edge is not on the server farm, the edge is at the device level or at the first entry point in the system. So both for technical and personal protective reason, I think centralizing biometrics is a nonsense.
And we are talking about a lot of different biometric technologies there. Some we're all going to be aware of, but for everybody listening, just to ensure that everyone's on the same page, what kind of biometric technologies are currently available out there?
Well, facial recognition becomes a hit these last few months. You have voice recognition that is still, in my own analysis, very good, although it has been breached. You have the fingerprint, the classical fingerprint that you see on some phone device and others. Multi-factor biometry, which is called behavioral matrix, that's the way you walk, the way you hold your phone, where you live, where you go, when you wake up, do you go for a drink after work, which I personally call the big spy model, but that might not be polite, but let's say profiling people out of habit and gait, that exists, and there are companies that do that. And in the end, all of these have their pro and their cons, but they're all based on database. So I refer to your previous question. They could be implemented better if they stay on the device, but that's another issue. So that's what's there. May I point to you, and you know that better than I do. Fingerprint is a nice story. The way a company A released it a few years ago, the same day, some actor in Germany took a picture of the hand of the finance minister in Germany, and given the quality of the camera on a smartphone, could reverse engineer the fingerprint and enter the profile of said minister. And then guess what? A few weeks ago, another company, another large phone manufacturer, put a fingerprint sensor in the screen to have a high resolution of the finger grooves. And guess what? It took less than a week for it to be hacked. So essentially, when we're dealing with biometry, it's not only about the technology, but is it hackable? That means, can you crack it open? Is it spoofable? Can you fake it? And is it not breaching your personal privacy? So these are the three questions that I think any person who wants to be informed should be asking him or herself.
So how do you see this tech evolving, and what kind of biometric technologies and also challenges and concerns are actually waiting for us on the horizon, do you think, as we continue to embrace this tech?
Well, when you think, let's step a bit back. Why do we need biometry? It's because we depend more and more on an intertwined complex web of interactions supported by IT, supported by the computer, whether it's for delivery of goods, services, interaction with the government. We can think about e-voting. So technology is there, and it needs to safely and securely recognize every one of us. So the trend is there, and the best way probably, it was a kind of a slogan 5 or 6 years ago, the body is the password. We're all unique, whether it's the brain, whether it's your heartbeat, your body shape, the body is really a password. And then if we have to interact with technology, we best be recognized for who we are, seamlessly to be walking across all these interactions across the IoT. But the body is the password is the future. But then I see a split in two forks. We have two different use cases. For me, but people might disagree with this, I don't compare the use case at the border. When you travel, for example, we need biometric passport these days. A passport as a picture. Why? Because you want to protect the border of a country. You want to prevent bad actors to entering more freely. Let's say your database of these picture and the database are linked with law enforcement official, and in the US TSA, in the UK, I don't know the name, in Europe, you have other name of agencies. That's use case of biometry for security, securing a zone, securing a country, securing an activity, a building. But at the other end of the spectrum is the IoT. And I would like to be provocative. Does my fridge front door need to have my face in a database linked to Interpol to serve me? I think no. Yeah. So this is a different use case when we want a seamless integration of my body across systems. And my real vision, which may be wrong, but that's what I happen to believe, would be to use the physiology. Because using feature like the anatomy of a person, the face, the finger, is a risk, but at the same time can be easily hacked because it's a comparison by image. So you can create a fake image. But using live signal, and I think about voice, I think about heartbeat, I think about brain beats, so neural tapping, I think about other things we might see with the liveliness of the human being is probably a better way to do it. And I happen to believe a safe way, because security is not safety. Security is the border. Safety is how I feel when I interact with machine, when I interact with my government, when I buy something on the internet. I don't need security, I need safety. And if I may provoke, and I hope it doesn't come across as arrogant, I would say Nazi Germany was very secure, and yet no one was safe. Just to put my point across, that safety and security have been confused these days.
At a very basic level, we're going to have people listening to our conversation today all over the world, and they're going to be listening to us on their smartphone, which they unlock with their thumb, their voice, or their face. So for all those people listening, how do they prevent their biometric data from getting stolen, or just better protect their biometric data?
At the moment, I'm afraid I will disappoint many of your followers, because there is no way to prevent. What protects us is illusion, because we're millions and millions using technology. They cannot hack everyone at the same time unless they breach a large-scale database. And even if they breach a large-scale database like Equifax, not every person will be stolen, because you have people making attractive targets or better target than others. So I try to say that if you lose something and you're a value target, you're more likely to be attacked and to be used than just the average person on the street. But having said that, I think it starts with information, because there are ways to implement the actual technology that can be better. So I believe in information for the consumer to put pressure on the industry to say, well, look, face break is great, but what if I'm in my phone and someone steals the phone from my hand while I'm on the picture? So then this person, if I happen to have my bank account, has access to my bank account. This doesn't happen frequently. It's happened a few times. But the problem is there is essentially no way to prevent hacking or spoofing with the technology we have today. Then there is a canard that I would like to kill a bit. People think about multi-factor. Multi-factor is fine, because if you have A, B, C combined together, you increase efficacy and performance while decreasing risk. That's good, but that adds friction. So at the end, if you need 1 minute to do anything across the IoT, you will feel trapped like in a cage, and which is worse as a consumer solution. So I'm sorry to disappoint, but there is no way today to really be totally safe, except by the fact that any of us is not a specific target. Now, I'm sorry, that might not be rosy, but that's what I felt.
No, not at all. But if we look into the future a little bit, or our immediate future, and the unthinkable should happen, what will people be able to do if their biometric data was to get stolen with your solutions and how you're helping them? How just to help people listening, how you're going to help resolve this problem?
Oh, that's a very interesting question, because so far it has been a bit neglected. Let's say it depends on what the legal protection you have. And then I will go to the specific of your question. Let's say in Europe with GDPR, some people now try to exert their rights, and it might lead to a new legal framework where you have recourse for remedies. Now, as of now, for example, in the US, a person whose biometric would be stolen from a device and with proof of it to say, oh shit, I'm really in deep trouble because someone is impersonating me across the internet. First, you have to file a report, I think, with the local authority, which is the police, and then there is something in the US called the Federal Trade Commission, which is doing statistics like the CDC. They monitor situation that they can see trends and can eventually protect on aggregate. Then you block all your cards. You block all you had on the phone, whether it's a bank card or whatever you add, and you warn people. I think you always have to warn the person in your contact list to say, well, guys, be careful, I've been breached, you might be contacted, etc. And the single most effective remedy, as I know now, is immediately use another form of biometrics because you've lost one. So if you say your fingerprint is lost, compromised, don't ever trust it again. Use the face, even if the face has a chance to be lost too, but at least you're protected because you moved away from the compromised information. That's what I would do if I was in this case, waiting for a better system to arise.
It is by using physiology that we make spoofability impossible. Whether you use the signal from the nerve system, neurophysiology, from the heart physiology, or from the voice physiology, the way we can process those live signals can make them impossible to be imitated. Once imitation is possible, deepfake are impossible and spoofability is off the table. Removing spoofability is a huge step forward.
And what excites you about the future, and what role do you want to play in that?
Well, I think we live in a fantastic time where technology can be a plus or a minus for humanity. It's up to us to decide which side of the line we choose to be on. So there is a need for data security, which become a real issue now. And biometry has a role to play. And I think, as I said, the IoT is there to develop and stay and will be probably beneficial for humanity. How to make it beneficial is by trimming down the risk. So I think going with the body is the password type of approach might be best for the people, for their privacy, for the quality of the service that are given, etc. And that's why I built my company, because I happen to believe in physiological, personal identification. So when we do neuroprint, I didn't say that, but neuroprint is these fingerprints from the brain pattern that we get. No two brains are alike, and it's stable. So essentially, your brain can authentify you. And then people say, oh, that may be scary. No, because the same brain, and I'm not making that up, the modelization with the eye that happens on the device is akin to a 1 million long character password. So imagine the possibility. Biology is so anthropic that while stable, if you extract those stable information, that at the same time you can be unique, and at the same time you can generate so much variation that you can encrypt all the time. So I'll try to make this a bit clear. We can recognize people with those technologies that we've been developing. We can encrypt all their data. Imagine sending an email in a year time or 2 year time, touching your keyboard or touching your phone, and having immediately encrypted by your body. Essentially, no one can read it except you or the legit destiny. And there are ways to solve that because, it's a key exchange. People have not waited to exchange key across the internet. So like the neuroprint can be part of a key. And at the same time, I think knowing that the body is a password, we can also segregate human from bots. And I didn't speak with you about that, but that's an important thing. Because when we think about what happens across the IoT, 50% of the traffic on the internet is generated by non-human actors. These decrease bandwidth, but these create problem, whether it's political, whether they're fraud, doesn't matter. These create problem. And if the device interacting with you and recognize you needs to feel a human hand or human touch, well, a bot, no matter how well programmed and coded it is not alive. It has no heartbeat, no brain beat, so it can be segregated against. So I'm a big believer, not only in my company, I'm building it, but at the same time, I'm a big believer in physiology. And I said, I expect other companies to come around, like based on voice, but done differently, based on heartbeat, but done the right way, that means without database, etc. And I think if we both at the same time identify, encrypt, and protect the privacy of the people, then we'll have done some good to use all technology for positive goals. Otherwise, the alternative, honestly, I'm frightened a bit by the rise of the ultimate police states. Okay, we're protected, but we're in prison. Look at some implementation of the IT for social control, for mass control, or repression control. That would be ugly. So if we want to avoid that the world becomes Orwellian, and Orwell was insightful when he says, when he wrote 1984, if we want to avoid that, I think we need to inform people. People need to compare, make their own judgments, challenge authorities, challenge me, challenge everyone who comes to the claim, and at the end, I think humankind will be best served.
Well, I'm sure you've awoken the curiosity of many people thinking about biometric technology and also where we're heading. But for anyone listening that wants to find out more about the great work that you're doing, can you remind the listeners of where they can find you online and even contact a member of your team if they do have any additional questions on any of the topics we've covered today?
Oh, that will be a pleasure. So essentially, the company name is Erendir. It's a bizarre spelling, but it comes from Lord of the Rings. That will save a lot of time and frustration to your listener. Erendir spelling is AERENDIR. And the website is, http www.erendir.info. And if they were to shoot, we can give you also to put some legend in your podcast, a contact point, an info point that people are welcome to ask questions. And criticism are welcome too, because, as I said, challenging is always good because it leads to better things, to better product, to better concept.
Well, one of the reasons I record this Daily Tech podcast is I think there's so much lazy reporting around technology and everything is almost dealt with sound bites now, such as if you hear about facial recognition, it's San Francisco's banned facial recognition, but it's real conversations and taking a deep dive into these subjects and trying to learn and debate the challenges ahead that is so important. And for those reasons alone, a big thank you for coming on and joining me today. Thank you, Martin.
I thank you, Neil, for the enjoyable conversation and any time. And questions are free because really, really, we live in interesting time, but interesting may also be dangerous.
What a great conversation about the future of biometric security. And today we've covered biometric technologies that are currently available, biometric technologies that are on the horizon, and we've also talked about how you can prevent yours from getting stolen. And what do you do if it does get stolen? Now, I know that we have at least one listener out there who is somewhat of an expert in facial recognition and facial authentication. So I'd love to hear his take on this conversation today, and indeed every single person listening to this show. It is a hot topic at the moment, so please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter @NeilCHughes, and drop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, where you'll find all 865 guests, links to their social channels, websites, and so much more. But that's it for another episode and another day closer to Derby County's playoff final, where there will be a place in the Premier League for the winning team. So please, if you're a neutral supporter, why not support Derby County, the Rams, for one day on Monday? And the result of that game will determine how happy or how sad I am on Monday's episode. But a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.